Hi there, and welcome to the alphabet wall hanging tutorial. I am Jacqueline Kyle with the Fable Tree, and I got this idea actually making an alphabet puzzle for my 2-year-old daughter who is obsessed with letters these days. She's learning all the letter sounds and she gets really excited about puzzles, and so I thought it was perfect. Just be aware that if you decide to make alphabet puzzles, there are lots and lots of laws you need to be aware of um, to make sure that that puzzle is safe for children. So just be aware. There's a lot to keep in mind. So I'm doing a wall hanging, okay? I'm going to create, first of all, I have my canvas here sized at 10.9 inches wide and 19 inches tall. I just like to be sure that, even if my design takes up my whole canvas, it will print successfully on my Glowforge, all right? So I recommend that you do the same, but it's up to you. So I'm starting with this rectangle tool, and I'm going to just make it doesn't have to be quite as I'm sorry, it doesn't have to be perfectly sized yet. We will adjust the proportions a little bit later on once we have all the letters there. Okay, and so I'm going to just start with that. I'm going to come to this dial in the top corner and just adjust, just round the corners a bit. I like a rounded rectangle for this. You can round it to whatever degree you like, that's fine. Now, before I forget, I want to come up here and remove this white fill. Okay, so I'm going to click and select the one with the little slash, which means empty fill. Okay, and now we just start adding our letters. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm really terrible at eyeballing things. And so I am going to place all my letters here, make score lines, inset score lines, so that when the time comes, I can glue my letters down and not be all wobbly or off center or spaced all strangely. So just a heads up about what I'm doing here. And I also am not going to do every letter on the same line because we don't know yet quite how much will fit. I'm zooming in here just so I can see a little bit better. So I think I can probably get A, B, C, D on the front, and I'm going to use Heinberg font. And let's zoom back out. Let's just play with size a little. Ooh, that's a nice size. Maybe 250. Okay, might be too big. So just play around with the size until you get a size that you're pretty happy with. And once you've got that, just keep creating your letters. All right, I'm going to actually just copy and paste my text box here. Come back to my text tool, E, F, G, H. We don't need to worry about aligning or anything like that just yet. We'll get there. I, J, K, L, M. If you have accidentally sized your letters too big and they're off the canvas, don't stop and adjust on just one text box. Just finish the rest and we'll resize them all together if need be. N, O, P, Q. All right. We'll see how this goes. R, S, T, V. And you'll see that mine might be too big or my canvas might be too small, so we'll deal with all that in a minute. So W, X, Y, Z. Let me just take a quick once over to make sure I didn't forget any letters. A, B, C, D, okay, whew, that would have been embarrassing. All right, it's probably embarrassing that I had to check to start with. So now I'm going to come on up here and select all of these boxes. All right, if you're not sure how to do that, you can either click and drag or hold down Shift while you select each kind of subsequent box there. All right, the first thing that I want to do is right-click, create outlines. Okay, your Glowforge cannot read a font, so you have to create your outlines. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is make sure that these are all grouped the way that they should be, and they are, so awesome. You can come back, select everything. I'm going to use this horizontal align center. All right, now they're all lined up perfectly centered, which is generally a nice thing. And then let's see here. We want to look at the vertical spacing here as well. And to do that, I like to use the show grid key. So view, show grid, and then view, I also like snap to grid. All right, and that will help us to just make sure that everything is evenly spaced. And I'm going to space these pretty close to one another because I want to maximize my board space. All right. So I'm just going to zoom in here so that you can see really well. You're looking at this lower bottom line, or that's what I do. And I just scoot it down, and that snap to grid tool, make sure it snaps to a grid line. All right. And then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to scooch it up until it snaps to that grid line. And so we have one square in between our boxes here. Now, you'll notice that our G hits that top line, our H, F, and E do not. That's okay. All right, these letters are slightly different heights, which does bother me in my soul. It does, but it's okay. And so I just use the bounding box as a guide for that, okay? And now you'll notice that if we continue down to do this with the others, if you click this and move it down, then you've messed up your top space, your spacing up here, right? So what I recommend is that you select both of those and scooch it down. And now you bring this line up, okay? And then just repeat that process all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to select all three of those, scooch it down to that next little line, grid line, I should say, and then just scooch all of this up. Okay. Do the same here. Oh, and that Q really makes things a little complicated with the design as well, but because it's got such a long tail here. And you can decide if you'd like to actually resize. And in fact, we're going to resize this Q just a smidge. So what I did is I took this direct selection tool, this filled in arrow, and I just clicked and dragged to make sure that all of these points were selected. Now I'm going to come up to the selection tool and just my Q is selected, okay? And I'm going to shift, click, and drag and just make it a smidge smaller. And I shift clicked so that the proportions would be maintained, right? Another option is to come over to this width and height, lock it here, to maintain the proportions and then shift it that way. But I liked being able to just grid snap it. Okay, cool. Click off of that. And now let's make sure it's still part of the box. And it is. Okay, good. All right. So at this point, we want to just continue this process. And I guess we had already, or I just did that. So that's fine. Okay, now scooch this one up. And you can make an artistic decision here. You'll notice that if we follow the same rule that we followed so far, that it's this little long tail is a bit of an outlier in terms of placement with everything else, right? And so I don't know if it messes it up, but it kind of makes it the spacing off, right? So I'm going to click this box, Object Ungroup, and then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to keep that selected and then vertical align center. All right, so we've kind of scooched up our Q related to our NOP. All right, do you like that? Do you hate it? You get to decide. You can move it a little bit more. We obviously need to come back up and readdress this situation, so we'll do that. Right now, let's assume that you like this shape or this placement. Select all four letters again, come to Object Group. All right, and now you want to just move that back down, just so that you're, again, maintaining that spacing that you already decided was going up there. Now, you can do this, okay, and it looks a little bit more in line with the rest. Now, the spacing is not identical between each of these lines. That's okay with me. It may not be okay for you. Maybe nudge it up a little more. That's all up to you. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Go ahead and select all of those, scooch it down to the next grid line. And we're almost done with that part, I promise. Okay, so at this point, you have a pretty good idea of how much wood you need. How much space do you want above and below? I'm actually going to select all of these, Object Group, okay, and that way they're all being treated as one group of shapes. Okay, and then I'm going to select all so that it's selecting that group that we just made and it's selecting the cut line of the outside. And we're going to just use this align tool. And if you don't have this up on your workspace, I want to mention you can do Object Align as well and do horizontal align, vertical align. Okay, and I'm going to just center it and center it. And actually what I'm going to do is add some circles at the top so that I can hang this from macrame rope instead of having to command strip it to the wall. So I'm going to just scooch this down a little bit because we actually don't really want it 100% vertically centered. If we were to leave it centered and then cut the holes might overlap with the letters, so that would be annoying. Okay, let's make two tiny little circles for cuts. I like maybe a 0.15 or a 0.2. I have the constrain tool selected, and just, oh no, I didn't mean to click it again. Come back up to your selection tool. See if you like that size. I think I might go a little bigger than that because my macrame rope is pretty big or pretty thick. But you can adjust this based on your own material needs. And you can absolutely eyeball where to put this in relation to the edge. You do just want to make sure that you're going to come back and, either use the grid for placement or center it. All right. Then you want to object group. Then you want to select all and horizontal align center. All right. And that way this is, centered. At this point, you should switch that over to a stroke instead of a fill. And actually, you're also going to switch this to a stroke instead of a fill because you want those letters to cut out. You don't want them to engrave. And if you have a fill instead, it will engrave. We are at this point going to come copy, create a new one. And in fact, I'm going to do a new canvas the same size but horizontal, which means we're going to have to move these around a little, but that's all right. I want the wood grain on these going horizontal, and so I need to do it that way. But again, up to you. If you like a vertical wood grain, you can leave it that shape if you prefer. And I'm not going to delete this. Instead, what I'm going to do is an object path, offset path, and just do a negative point, let's see, 0.03. Let's do a negative 0.04. All right, so I want to zoom in and show you what that did. It made smaller shapes. Before I go further, let me switch it to my score color so I can tell what to switch. All right, so here's the original letter shape that we made. Okay, and here this is inset, or it's offset to a negative 0.04 inches. All right, so just a slightly smaller version of all of those letters. Okay, and in fact, if I was smarter, or if I was smart, I would have changed that outer stroke to a different color too, but that's okay. So just to make things simple on ourselves, let's click and drag over everything that isn't a letter and change that stroke color to anything else. All right, anything else. And now what we can do is click this. You'll see that both of these strokes are selected. Come to Object and Ungroup. And I know that's going to be annoying, but what this does is it ungroups the inside. Actually, first we need to continue to ungroup until we can't ungroup anymore. That's what we need to do. So Object, Ungroup, Object. Okay, so that just made sure that everything is ungrouped. And now you'll see that I can select either this green stroke or the black stroke. So I'm going to select the black stroke. You can certainly do this individually and go through and click every black stroke and delete. But once you've got that first black stroke selected and you know it's the right one, you can come up to Select, Same, Stroke Color, and delete it all at once. And that's why we changed this outer color, stroke color for the moment. All right, now I typically, as a practice, use black for my cut lines. So I'm gonna just change that back so it doesn't annoy me. All right, so now what we have is a stroke, okay, that's a different color than this cut line. What that does is it allows us in the Glowforge user interface to assign a different function to these letters than to this. So what we can do is cut out the circles, cut out this rounded rectangle, and then score all of these letters. Now, why would we score these letters, and why on earth did we want them to be a little bit smaller than the actual cut out letters? Well, here's the deal. Your placement is not going to be perfect, and also the laser, we're coming over to our letters file, is going to remove some of the material as it cuts. And so your letter, if it cuts out like this, is going to be just a little bit smaller than what it looks like. All right. So if I were to cut this just as it is, and if I had not done the offset, you would be able to see the score line around the edges of the letter, especially if your placement is a little shaky. By adding that negative offset, these score lines will be helpful to you and also invisible because your cutout letters will completely hide it. Okay? Now, here's what I like to do at this point. This is optional. You don't have to do it. I like to select all, copy, open up a new canvas, and open up that horizontal canvas, paste, and then come over here without unselecting anything, and just do a 90-degree. Okay? And that way it will cut sort of the same. I don't have to rotate it once I pull it into the Glowforge app. All right, so I would save this one. All right, in fact, let's save it real quick. Alphabet. It'd be cool if I could type. Wall hanging, I'm going to put 3 because I've made a few of these. I like to always save in Illustrator format first and then save as an SVG. Make sure it's SVG 1.0. Make sure responsiveness is off, and then you can hit OK. All right. Now, over here, we just want to object ungroup. All you have to do is fit all these letters onto your wood, and you can even object ungroup again. You can even scooch them all over so that you're maximizing space, right? You want it to kind of all, it doesn't need to be spaced nicely since you're going to just be gluing it onto the background. Now, pro tip, use 3M on the back of whatever material you use for your letters, and that way it's just peel and stick instead of having to worry about all the glue. All right, so once you have object ungrouped and moved your letters where they need to be, you should follow the same save technique that I just showed you, and you are good to go. I would love to see how your project turns out. Send me an email at jacqueline@thefabletree.com or share with me on Facebook. All right, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Have a good one.